Good morning and welcome to this webinar, Back in Business SME Support Ecosystems for Cultural and Creative Sectors. This webinar is organized by the OECD and the European Commission, Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture as part of the Creative Europe program and in partnership with Eurocities, World Cities Culture Forum and ICOM, International Council of Museums. Through this webinar series, we aim to provide evidence and guidance to European and OECD cities and regions on ways to support the creative economy and to support it also through the recovery and build on its power in the recovery as well. Today, we have the pleasure to be in Flanders, with Flanders. We are hosted by Flanders. Historically, one of the wealthiest regions in Europe, not only in terms of its economy, but because of its stunning cultural heritage. The quality of the Flemish cloth was very well known under the Roman Empire, and during the Renaissance years, the impressive art and architecture of Bruges, Ypres, and Ghent was rivaling those of northern Italy. Today, Flanders is home to a booming creative economy, with culture and creative sectors accounting for 6% of its gross value. So it is my particular pleasure and honor to introduce our host, Mr. Jan Jambon, Minister President of Flanders. Minister President, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, from all over the OECD and from all over the cultural and creative sectors. It's for me really great pleasure to welcome you all here on behalf of the government of Flanders. First of all, I would like to offer a warm welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, as the Minister President of Flanders, I'm pleased and honored to open this online webinar tackling SME support ecosystems for the cultural and creative sectors. I will continue talking about the CCS when I refer to the cultural and creative sectors. The collaboration between Flanders and OECD is well established and strong. I would like to refer to the long-standing and successful cooperation with the OECD Local Employment and Economic Development, the LEAD program. Over the past years, the Department of Work and Social Economy has been an active member of the LEAD Directing Committee and contributed to numerous projects on local job creation, social economy, and was part of the steering group of the OECD flagship publication on job creation and local economic development. Back at the end 2019, Flanders hosted the OECD Local Development Forum in Antwerp, and I had the honor of opening the 15th OECD Local Development Forum in the city of Antwerp. Back then, I really announced that it was my intention to make the collaboration between Flanders and the OECD even stronger. I also would like to thank Lamia Kamal Chaoui, Director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities, which serves the LEAD Committee for this fruitful cooperation, which now also covers culture and creative sectors. Today, I'm happy to announce that we took the collaboration one step further. Flanders has become part of the pioneering project on the importance of culture, creative economy and local development. During this project, several issues concerning the CCS will be tackled, and I look forward to learning more about the economic impact of the CCS for the local development on Flemish level. On the agenda of the webinar today and tomorrow is the topic SME support ecosystems for the CCS. My administration worked closely together with the OECD project leaders to organize an interesting two-day webinar. A lot of international speakers are invited to share their thoughts, and I'm especially delighted to share with you all the long-term strategy to foster additional finance and entrepreneurship in the Flemish cultural sector. In my view, this strategy strengthens the entire ecosystem, and it started as a bottom-up co-creating process in collaboration with the entire cultural sector in Flanders. Thanks to that process, a strong supporting set of instruments was established, and after a period of 3 years, I see a considerable rise in the entrepreneurial attitude in the Flemish not-for-profit cultural sector. Thanks to this strategy, all subsectors of the CCS, both for-profit and not-for-profit, can flourish and can make our region a creative and attractive place to work and to live. The proof of my observation was delivered at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, when the first economic predictions were made for the upcoming crisis. One of the statements that were formulated by economic impact institutions was that before the outbreak of the pandemic, the CCS were economically stronger than the traditional Flemish economy. That was the good news. The sad news was that they would be hit more severely than the traditional economy. That is also a reality I try to tackle by developing an emergency policy for the cultural sector, and I will continue to do so. My administration will talk about this strategy and approach during several workshops today and tomorrow. The spotlight session of this webinar is the book publishing sector, and the choice for this sector is very well made, since Flanders was guest of honor together with the Netherlands at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2016. Book publishing has long played an essential role in the economies around the world, supporting the livelihoods of millions of authors, translators, publishers, distributors, and booksellers. But more importantly, this CCS sector is essential for our community's ability to educate future generations and open new worlds to millions of people. At the same time, literacy rates are dropping, book sales are slumping, and publishing houses are struggling to survive, not to mention the challenges due to the COVID-19. Recently, I decided to increase the support of the book publishing sector through our Flanders Literature Fund. From 2021 on, Flanders Literature can develop and expand its policies for a greater impact of books on the social and cultural capital of our society. I'm convinced that inventive and resourceful CCS in combination with aimed government support will lead to sustainable solutions that can tackle the crisis. The OECD has a wealth of data, insights, and reports which can supply the necessary material for evidence-based policy. I hope that as a creative region, we can learn from the other participating regions, but also from the OECD experience to unlock the potential of the CCS for the traditional economy. In the debates we have in Flanders, I see a huge hidden economic impact of the CCS that is not yet revealed. That is why the pioneering project Culture, Creative Economy and Local Development is so valuable for all participants. I would like to close by thanking the OECD and the European Commission, but also my Department of Cultural, Youth and Media and Flanders Literature for organizing this two-day conference. And I wish you all a lot of inspiration, invigorating discussions, and an interesting exchange of ideas. Thank you so much.
Minister President, and for your warm welcome. And also we very much look forward to learning from Flanders on how you support innovation in creative sectors, how you fund the creative sectors as well, and support digital transformations, and indeed how creative sectors are part of the broader regional development strategy of Flanders. So we very much look forward to learning from your region. Thank you so much. So let's now enter into our what we call spotlight session on book publishing, and Minister President already provided an introduction to this one as well. We have a very rich agenda for this almost 2 hours discussion that is ahead of us on the book publishing sector. Maybe I'll provide a very brief intro before we start the discussion, just to explain some of the basic things for those who are a little bit far from this sector. Of course, this sector includes publishers, authors, well, illustrators, translators, also booksellers, and the wider ecosystem includes, of course, libraries, schools, universities, and well, us citizens and parents, and we're so grateful to the sector who is helping us to stay sane throughout the last year, and also with our homeschooling duties. So obviously, as many creative sectors over the past year, the book publishing sector is undergoing quite a radical transformation and is quite impacted by the lockdown measures around the world. But maybe also this current somehow highlighted and amplified the underlying challenges that were already there and that sector was already facing and trying to address before the pandemic. And these challenges are related to few things. Maybe how one of the things that was there high on the agenda is how to reach out to new groups of population, including those most in need. So there's all this inclusivity agenda that was already quite high before the crisis, but also how to ensure diversity in terms of authors, languages, themes, how to also ensure the financial sustainability of those who work in the sector, of writers, illustrators, translators, how to cultivate and help grow talent and new skills and professions. So when we were discussing with Paul Hermans, our host today, director of Flanders Literature, what should be the theme of this session, of course, we would like to speak a little bit about the impact and the transformation and this incredible push for digital that is happening now in book publishing and in the book fairs as well. So we would want really to understand what's happening now with this sector. But then we want to also go back to these different challenges that were there and have been amplified over the past year. And of course, we want to understand what the challenges are, but we also have gathered an incredible panel of experts and speakers who can help us, based on their experience, distill some lessons of what have worked in the past and what works in addressing these different challenges. So we hope that at the end of this session, we'll be quite inspired and more knowledgeable, and we can distill really concrete actions for our cities and regions, for policymakers, on how to put in place different projects, programs, and where to channel resources as well in the most impactful way. So with this, maybe I stop with my very brief introduction, and I would like now to turn to maybe to introduce our speakers. So maybe we can show the next slide. Yes, as I was saying, we have an incredible and very diverse panel of speakers with us today, and you will see them live in a moment, and I'm very pleased to introduce them. We have with us Jan William Bos, interpreter, translator, but also writer and mentor. Michael Kollmann, Chair, Inclusive Publishing, International Publishers Association. Morten Visby, who is President of the European Council of Associations of Literary Translators. Peter Jenkins, Chairman of the Global Network for Early Years Book Gifting. Jenny Kuhne is joining us from Frankfurt, where she's Director, Digital and Rights, Frankfurt Book Fair. And Jelena Pazzoli joins us from Bologna, where she's Exhibition Manager of the Bologna Children's Book Fair. Before we start with our discussion, our host, Paul Hermans, Director of Flanders Literature, together with Marie Noble, Commissioner General, Brussels Book Fair, will set the scene. So they will provide a framing introduction to the panel discussion. Paul, Marie, I'm very pleased to introduce you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Hello, everyone, and thank you, OECD and European Commission, for the opportunity to have this policy focus on book publishing sector, one of the largest cultural and creative sectors in Europe, with a total market value estimated 37 billion euros and more than 300,000 book professionals working in Europe alone. I'm Paul Hermans. I'm the director of Flanders Literature, the Flemish literature fund that supports the literacy chain from author to reader. We facilitate a widely accessible literary landscape and want to ensure better visibility for literature from Flanders at home and abroad. I've got the opportunity as a co-organizer to set this scene, as Katja said, for our panel discussion. And this esteemed panel with extensive expertise from different angles in the literary sector will elaborate more on the themes Katja mentioned. After my brief introduction, my Belgian colleague Marie Noble, General Commissioner of the Brussels Book Fair, tells you more about the conclusions of the European Book Forum that she organized yesterday together with the European Commission. This online book forum tackled some challenges faced by European publishers and bookstores that are no wonder very similar of the ones we talk about today. A famous Dutch writer once said, "Life is so simple, but people have made it so complicated." Well, we can't deny that today's dragon of challenges has multiple heads. If we zoom in on the book publishing sector, it is no different. Nowadays, the global community is constantly confronted with several crises at once, it seems: climate change, overconsumption, systemic inequality, misinformation, and the new kid on the block, COVID. But what makes COVID so unique is that it has not created new challenges as much as it has sharpened the existing ones, really amplified them, highlighted them. The forced distance between everything and everyone suddenly left no room for procrastination. Radically digital is the answer, you say. Yes, it offers advantages, but it also has many limitations, not to mention the consequences for regions where the digital infrastructure is partially or completely lacking. Book publishing plays an essential role in our global economy, but more importantly, it plays a leading role in the education of future generations, with the book as the big window to new worlds, mindsets, and imagination. And imagination is the air of mind, of course. Throughout 2020 till today, the book publishing sector has embraced this responsibility in inventive and resourceful ways to help communities through this uniquely challenging moment. During this crisis, governments all over the world have shown a growing appreciation of the book sector as an essential part of society, often resulting in new ways of support and funding. Last summer, the Flemish government decided to partially compensate writers and translators for their revenue losses due to postponed publications, reduced royalty income, cancelled appearances and readings. And next to this, starting from this year, the support of the book publishing sector through our Flemish Literature Fund is structurally increased. But Flanders literature cannot handle the economic pressure in Flanders on its own. But that doesn't alter the fact that from our market supplementing and correcting role, we must pursue a flanking policy to strengthen the book trade through, for example, targeted support for valuable publications which are now at risk of getting postponed or cancelled, or through the promotion for translation of books at trade fairs, for example. And from 2021 on, Creative Europe also launches a new strand of support for books in its program, which is it's very good news, of course, for the promoting of diversity, creativity, innovation, internationalization, and so on. Despite these encouraging facts, the pandemic has exposed vulnerabilities as well, with disruptions at every link in the supply chain, fixed routes to market, and sudden lockdowns. We are left with countless books collecting dust in warehouses, bookshops, and libraries. And critically, some publishers and bookshops had not yet adapted to the shift towards digitization, an oversight that left them foundering when the pandemic shut off all sale channels but e-commerce. In Belgium and the Netherlands, for example, we have seen that for 2020, the revenue market share of bookstores shrank with 10%, while the market share for online book sales rose for more than 20%. It's important here, I think, to take into account that a lot of these e-commerce revenue streams go to international platforms that don't contribute to the local book publishing networks, and in the long term leaves us with big challenges in terms of the sustainability of both the local book trade and the ecological aspect of the supply chain. In addition, the economic impact on writers and translators, as I said, was very severe. Revenue losses due to postponed publications, cancelled appearances. The figures of the European Writers' Council spoke for themselves. 60% of respondents say they'd classify the effects on author income as very to extremely severe. And if the shift to digital appearances could be made, it often came at the expense of decent remuneration. At the same time, cite what Minister President just said, literacy rates are dropping, book sales are slumping, and publishing houses are struggling to survive. But there is a silver lining. The crisis has been a brusque wake-up call to the need to find new, innovative routes to the reader and adopt diversified, durable business models. Last year has shown that necessity really is the mother of invention, as the book publishing sector embraced digitization where possible. I'm very curious what Ms. Kuhne from the Frankfurter Buchmesse can share with us about last year's digital evocation of the book fair, which was one of the world's publishing's largest effort to provide an online alternative to a physical event. But has this digitization also improved inclusivity? In society and in politics, we see that the pandemic has put increased pressure on the underprivileged and certainly on minorities and women. Michiel Koolman stated, this pandemic is also an opportunity for more diverse and more inclusive publishing houses. The opportunity is now, let's embrace it in our publishing community. Well, very interested to hear his insights. And from the reader's point of view, you have the global network of book gifting programs that is very successful in its efforts to impact also the hard to reach or disadvantaged families through its cross-sectoral networking approach. They work on a positive reading culture in the home, as Peter Jenkins will explain, and home happens to be the cultural arena of the COVID world. The most important resource of the 21st century is talent. Everybody agrees. So what about the impact of a talent development program, such as connecting emerging literary artists supported by the EU? Translator Jan Willem Bos, mentor for that new talent, will testify. And speaking of diversity, the translator is forced to function more and more as an ambassador for the literature, especially when it concerns a small language. Fine, but who pays the translator for this work? Morten Visby explains the context. Dear policymakers, as The Little Prince in the book by the French writer Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. Well, since there are no children present, we will try to do our very best to point out some good practices to you and explain why you can make a sustainable difference, both socially and economically, implementing them. Now is the time to really benefit from the cohesion built in adversity, to craft a recovery strategy that enables the book publishing industry and its stakeholders to become more resilient and more agile. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Quite an inspiration there. Marie, can I now turn to you? And indeed, we are quite interested to learn from what are the lessons from the past 2 days. Maybe you can share this with us.
Yes, with pleasure. Good morning, everyone. I'm quite happy to be on the same scene with Paul Hermans because it's quite symbolic for us. We've been flirting at the Brussels Book Fair with the Flemish community, Flemish speaking community for 2 years now. And now we decided to go a bit further and to get married with this community, sort of solidarity and to make exchanges together, not Paul and me, but the two communities to sort of enhance and address questions about books and the book economy and about our literature. So it's I'm quite happy to be here with him. We are today halfway through the Brussels Book Fair Professional Week, addressing issues linked to the book economy. And yesterday, as Paul said, we hold the Book European Forum at the European Parliament. And I would like to very shortly come back to a few aspects and ideas that were developed throughout the day. Maybe first of all, a few figures that actually struck me. It's the evolution of printed books from 2019 to 2020 in Belgium. In Flanders, it's plus 4%, and in Wallonia, it's minus 5%. So it will be interesting to try and figure out why we have this sort of disparity. And we have the same kind of disparities throughout Europe. I give you two examples. Holland is plus 7%, and Germany is minus 2.3% within the year. So that could be questionable, I think. It's an interesting, there are interesting figures. Of course, there are differences in editorial genres as well, but that's quite similar throughout Europe. And comics, mangas, children's literature, they've raised a lot during the year, and tourism and literature about event sectors, they dropped a lot. If I have to pin up 3 words from yesterday to try and summarize the whole day, I would say diversity, solidarity, and gathering. To find new ways of development, diversity is the key, not only to maintain sort of ecology of the book chain and to be really sure that every kind of voice could be heard, it is very important to emphasize this diversity. Solidarity was shown throughout the day, throughout all the different aspects, elements of the chain of books, but not only between regions, between countries. There was a big solidarity shown, a sharing of experience, something that's never been seen so far and so promptly before. And of course, there was a definite lack of gathering that was pointed out, and that's the fact that the whole book economy functions a lot thanks to these exchanges, thanks to the gathering. So that was something pointed out. Maybe two good practices that were shown and explained yesterday, one in Belgium and one in Madrid, Spain. There was innovative ways for booksellers to exist. One was Librel in Belgium, and the other one is Todos tus libros. Very interesting to see how booksellers have, via a platform, have reinvented ways of tackling the book economy and being part of the book chain with very interesting new manners. I would like to pay particular attention, that's for the policymakers. That was mentioned all day long yesterday. Funding is essential to support book economy, even though of course it's an economy and it can work with private money. Funding is essential in this field. And last thing but not least, I would like to lay emphasis on something that came back many times yesterday, is the importance of fairs for publishers, because it's really connected to their existence and sometimes even survival. That was it. I will be very happy and curious to attend the following sessions, and I wish you a very, very good day.
Thank you so much, Marie, and it was really great to hear the first conclusions of this enormous event that you are hosting this week. Well, as I was saying, we wanted to dive a little bit deeper to understand what is the transformation that is happening now today with the book sector. And for this, maybe it's good now to turn to Jenny Cuny. Jenny, you have been working with the Frankfurt Book Fair for quite a number of years. But last year you hosted the first digital edition of the book fair, and I guess people around here are very curious to understand, did it work? What are the lessons learned? How you made it happen? What's your idea? Will this be the model of the future, hybrid model? So Jenny, maybe you can share with us your lessons learned and how you did it.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me and having me here today. I'm very honored. So first of all, what I obviously had to pick up on was what Marie just reported on, the importance of fairs for publishers. That's obviously something that we as Frankfurt Book Fair, and I'm sure Elena can relate, are happy to hear about. The crisis has hit us hard as well, because we are a platform for the sector and for the industry. So something affecting them so harshly is obviously affecting us in a very dire way as well. And the other thing that Marie pointed out is that funding is essential, and truly for us, for Frankfurt Book Fair, to actually host a completely digital edition was only possible thanks to generous funding from the German state. We were part of a large funding program actually for the book publishing industry, or for the cultural industry in its whole. It was called Neustart Kultur, so restarting culture. The German government has put up a huge fund, and we received parts of that to actually give back to the publishing industry. So through us, the German ministry funded the German or even the international publishing scene. And thanks to that funding, we were able to come up with a multitude of offers that were free of charge for our exhibitors and for our trade visitors. So for anyone attending Frankfurt, the digital version, it was completely free of charge for them, which was great because it allowed us to experiment and to try to come up with as many solutions as possible in a very limited time frame, and to try out and see what might and might not work. And we were following a bit of what, Bologna Book Fair was the first book fair actually to do something digital and to respond to a very short notice situation and a very short notice cancellation. So kudos also to Elena, who will, I think, share with us more. Did it work? Did it not work? Parts of it worked, parts of it didn't. What we saw in terms of diversity and what we were really thankful for was that, for one, we had many exhibitors as digital exhibitors that we did not have before, because these publishers either weren't around when the last edition took place, or the costs of traveling and actually attending a physical book fair were just too costly for them, too high. So that gave us a much broader reach, and suddenly we had clients and contacts we had never had before, which is something that is obviously great in a digital realm, that suddenly your reach and your network can be extended by and not limited by physical appearance. And that was also true for our publishing, for our public readers. We mounted a 24-hour book TV, if you want to call it, where our publishers could present their authors, readings, discussions for the reading public, actually. And whereas in Frankfurt, we usually only reach the German public, because these are the ones that can travel. Sometimes we have a few readers coming from outside of Germany, but it is something that is limited to travel and budget. Now with this Bookfest Digital, as we called it, we reached readers from over 105 nations. We had English language and German language programs. So again, through the digital routes, we were suddenly able to reach a much more diverse and international reading public for our publishers themselves, right? Because it was them who presented themselves. So these lessons, that is invaluable for us, because Frankfurt Frankfurt is a platform. We want to provide a space where international publishing and readers can meet, can connect, can collaborate. So for us to have that extended reach was unheard of before, and that is something that we cherish and that we want to build on more. On the other hand, something that Marie also said, I can only say that I completely agree, is that the serendipity and the gathering of book fairs, the physical encounter, the looking someone in the eye. I find it curious that in the digital realm, while we see each other, you never ever look someone in the eye directly, and that is something that cannot be replicated, or at least we haven't found the right recipe yet. We did have great networking sessions. We did have, we facilitated meetings as much as we could, but to put that up on a large scale like the physical fair would, with 4,000 exhibitors, 7,000 exhibitors, 100,000 of visitors, is absolutely impossible, or at least it proved impossible last year. But still, there's hope in that the digital can extend what you have as a physical event. I think that is the learning that we take away. Looking forward and trying to find out how this all sits together, we think that everything has its place. The physical fair cannot be replaced. The serendipity factor of it all, the personal meetings, how the whole town actually vibrates with publishing professionals is special and can't be replaced, but it can be extended. So we think of a digital arm that allows us to reconnect and meet each other throughout the year in a digital realm, and then have a big 5-day event in Frankfurt as the main focal point. But digital can be a great addition. And as I said, diversity, obviously the people who don't own digital devices are left out of that as well. So that's, it can't be the answer to everything, but it's a good first step, and a good way to reach other audiences and try and see what works for them, and how we could change Frankfurt as well to make it even more open and more accessible.
No,
So I think,
no, so for me, maybe some of the takeaways is this, well, obviously the importance of funding, and you underline that the availability of the Restart federal funding allowed you not only to make it happen, but also to support the smaller publishers.
Yeah.
With these funds. And what I also liked very much that you mentioned that it allowed you to experiment. And sometimes when designing public policies and providing funding, we forget that funding should be provided for experimentation, especially
Yes.
when we deal with cultural and creative sectors. So that was quite a big point for me. And yeah, surprising to see that you had this broad reach. Well, no, not surprising, but still it's broader reach, no, as you say, and more diverse reach. Maybe just one small question to you. But of course, you work very closely with the Frankfurt city government, and well, the fair represents a huge economic impact for the hospitality industry, and well, brings in money for the city very much so. What will be this interaction with the city in going forward? I mean, in this year, next year, how is this cooperation shaping now?
Well, it has been a very close cooperation for as long as I can remember, let's say, because precisely like you said, the fair has a huge impact on the whole of the city. Actually, the city also mounts their own book festival in Frankfurt while it's happening, and we cooperate as well on another festival. So I think the crisis has brought the city and the fair even closer together. I can't speak to that very deeply because I'm not involved in the deeper discussions around it, but it seems that we are cooperating closely, the city and the local government, because in Germany we have federal states, and they have, we have our own government in Hessen, which is the state that Frankfurt is based in. They have also supported us and have fought for Frankfurt Book Fair to remain, the pillar of the book publishing industry. So yeah, that cooperation, and I think that collaboration as well will continue and intensify.
Thank you. Elena, may I now turn to you? Well, we already heard a little bit about the pioneering role of Bologna Children's Book Fair in embracing the joys of digital last year. Maybe you can share some lessons learned with us, please.
Can you hear me now? Okay, well, so thank you very, yes, it's a pleasure for me to be here to share with you ideas and experiences, and thank you very much for having me. Yes, we found ourselves acting as the pioneers of this digitalization of the fairs, and it was good and bad in the meantime. I mean, it was very good because I think that feeling as pioneers gave us strength and commitment. We had to make it. We had so few weeks, but we had to make it. And in the meantime, of course, it was a bit bad because we didn't have any good, any best practice to be inspired by, to copy somehow. So, but it was a great experience, and I remember it as a better experience than the experience that I am living now. And now I will tell you more about this. But I like to underline one particular issue before getting to the focus of my answer, and it is that the Bologna Book Fair is organized by Bologna Fiere. That's a fair organizer. It's like Read, So we do fairs in many different fields. The difference between us and Reed is that we are also the owner of the fairground where we do the fairs, and we rent the fairground to other organizers for their own fairs. So this put us in a difficult situation because we couldn't enjoy any support by any ministry, by any governative body. So we were not included in the supports given to the publishing sector. And in the meantime, as the fair industry is not that big in Italy in terms of employees, the fair industry was not the top of the governative support policies. And so actually we had no support at all for what we did. And it was all the whole thing was made as an investment to keep us close to our community, not to disappear and then pop up the next year. And of course, we didn't make any. This was not a decision. The commitment was obvious, but then when after the digital fair and when we had to look at what we had, the expenses, the losses, you know, we realized that we had done even an even bigger enterprise, and it would, if we then what we could do if we had some support. So comparing our experience to Frankfurt experience, also, I think that of course we have somehow reflected the same difference we experience at the physical fair, huge thing and a tiny thing. So let me say we didn't even have the time to consider of including publishers who had not been exhibitors before. But in the meantime, I don't see we can have enough funding to do bigger, really bigger things in the next future. But I hope that we can think of our future at least as a hybrid future, not as digital only. What I can say again that makes Bologna a bit different from the other fairs is that we are all professional, so we don't even have the weekend for the general public. So when I think of my regular target, it's publishers, agents, illustrators, authors. It's not families, it's not children. In the case of the digital fair, it was such a pleasure to be able to share our contents with these different publics and reconnect somehow with the city, because we usually support the program made by the municipality and the museums of Bologna. We support them, we give them our contents. We are inside this committee, but actually we have to keep always a bit ourselves a bit apart, because for Bologna, the exhibitors, the international exhibitors, would never accept to have the general public at the fair. We have tried and tried and tried in the past, and it's not possible. The Italian publishers are less than 10%, So it's not meaningful to welcome the public just to make them meet with the Italian publishers, because it's a too tiny area. So it was so good to be able to share the content, to promote the fair. The teachers are included among the professionals admitted to the fair, but of course they don't feel like being really welcome, because there's another kind of activity going on instead of promotion of the new books and promotion of reading. So it was so great to include them this year as players, as all the others. What did we do? And what worked, and what are we developing now? First of all, because doing the digital fair was not, I mean, the first step was not to do a digital fair, but it was to create a platform suitable to our exhibitors to show their books and exchange copyrights. We had very few weeks to set up this platform. We worked with one of our regular partners, that's PubMatch, but the platform was a bit naive, let me say, because it was done really in a few weeks. But we have seen that it is a very interesting tool. Actually, we had been talking about something like this for some years before the pandemic. So when the pandemic broke out, I can't say we were ready, but at least we were ready in our thoughts. Nothing had been done before concretely, but we were on that page, because the idea of acting as a meeting place all year long and having the book fair as the huge event once a year after 12 months of talking, liaising was already in our programs, but nothing in real perspective. So it was good to get started, even if we made it not as well as we could have done in a longer time. And now we have worked a lot in these last months, because we wanted to keep the platform alive also when this nightmare will be over. And so we are adding and adding features, and we are really confident in the publisher's appreciation, and we will keep this service for free. And anyway, in any case. And then after the platform for the rights exchange, we asked ourselves, and how about our illustrators, the winners of this year competition, and how about the winners of the awards? And so we started adding and adding pieces and bricks to this building. So at the end, we didn't have a real big fair as in the past. We usually have 150 events. We did some 40 events online, but we created an online BCBF museum, that is BCBF galleries. And this is something that we will keep on doing also in the future, because in that museum we uploaded all our exhibitions. And so again, we had a great audience also made of families and classes and teachers with their pupils from different countries, of course. And this was absolutely great. Now, I said that we are experiencing a very difficult time now, because on one side we are developing these digital activities. We are launching a program of webinars next week, because we trust this this medium. We think that I want to be optimistic, and I want to see what's good in in this pandemic, what we can bring with us, what are the positive things that we have learned to do. And this possibility of offering our contents to illustrators and other audiences is so great, and we can't miss this in the future, I think. So we are working to become better organizer also on this virtual fairground, let me say.
They're very good. I already, maybe if I can just draw some of the a couple of lessons. It's quite different what you experienced from what was happening in Frankfurt. It was a bit of do it yourself, no, but it proved to be viable because of this enlarged scale. So, and there are plenty of other things that you hope to be developing now going forward. And well, you said that you reached out to much broader audiences, no, and you connected with the families, with the children, etc. So it is not like a closed fair for the community, but also reaching out to the to the readers very much. So maybe if you allow me now, I wanted to turn to Peter Jenkins just for a very brief comment, but from a bit another perspective, from the reading promotion perspective. I mean, what do you think is happening now with all this push for digital? Maybe very briefly, Peter, and then we will come back to other questions as well.
Well, thank you for inviting me and for inviting me to represent ODU's book gifting programs, which started about 30 years ago in the USA and UK, and you'll know Book Start Flanders, Book Start Netherlands, Leisure Start in Germany, and other such programs. Digital's been a challenge to us, though there have been some opportunities, because our programs are called book gifting because there is face-to-face gifting of new books to children and families. And in that gifting, the nature of shared reading with a baby or a toddler is modeled by the gifter, ideally, and in most cases. And what's amazing, usually that modeling is important because, for instance, if you look at the videos on our Japan members site, you see babies very young reacting to books in a way that parents are astonished to see. And it is astonishing to see these children responding with delight to the books. And the interaction is very powerful. And it's also called reading aloud because that reading environment of new words that stories give to the child's brain impact their language development, impact their cognitive development. And research has shown that the more face-to-face interactions, the more the behavior change on the behalf of families, and the earlier families start reading. So going digital was necessarily a challenge with lockdown, without being able to have that face-to-face. There were, in terms of gifting, some benefits. For instance, new channels going to feeding centres, reaching more disadvantaged audiences that way. Books like Flanders was librarians were on the doorstep giving books, again, in a way that they wouldn't have done before, normally through health clinics or through libraries. But there were some digital opportunities. The American co-founder of the concept digitally were having to go online in their it's led by pediatricians in their telehealth sessions, and they were seeing into families and into homes, and they could talk to families in a way, in a context that they hadn't seen before, and that was beneficial to them. We had online support for parents through library activity, for instance, and again, Flanders did something similar with a large uptake. But the real difficulty is, even though some of the research, our first research in lockdown showed that 34% of families were doing more reading under lockdown, the Finnish Reading Centre showed 23% doing more shared reading. We had 13% of parents doing it for the first time, but our research from 5 universities coming out in October last year was also showing that it's the babies and toddlers who have been hardest hit by the pandemic and by lockdowns, and particularly in their reading and access to reading. So it's a very mixed message, and the question is whether digital is supporting the increased outreach, which there has been. I mean, all our programs went online, and all our online meetings had massive uptake, such that sometimes digitally it could almost not be catered for. But is that reaching the disadvantaged? Is that reaching the diverse audience? That's the big question, and the big unsureness, but the big difficulty, challenge that needs addressing.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And we'll try to go back to this question on how to reach out to those most in need a bit later in the session. Maybe for a final comment, I wanted to turn to Michael Coleman. Well, you are a publisher yourself, so you know the industry from within. And so it's for that experience, maybe I wanted to ask you, well, we're talking here about also the financial sustainability of the sector throughout this year and, well, the next one, maybe. So one of the questions was, what are the key things that the public sector should be doing now to support the business in the sector? Well, we saw that in some countries in the past, countries were subsidizing the distribution costs for newspapers and magazines. Is this something that worked well and you think is viable, also interesting for the publishing sector? And what are other measures that are needed now to support the business here?
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you first for inviting me and representing the IPA. The IPA, the International Publishers Association, has a global perspective. And we also issued a report from Response to Recovery. And I think there were 3 kind of takedown lessons there. And I've heard many of the themes already, but maybe it will be certainly interesting that some countries which are on the road to recovery, they are characterized by a very mature digital economy. They also have a national culture of reading. So, you know, that ties back to what Peter just said. And they have a joint up lobby approach. So a really an approach where both governments and publishers and librarians and other players work together. And we see that other countries who face an uncertain future in the road to recovery, they kind of lack all of this. So they are challenged on the digital agenda. There's quite a separation or complete absence of any support or joint up support. And there is even illiteracy also of a lack of a culture of reading. So that kind of sets the stage at a very high level. So some of the examples that worked really well in my country, in the Netherlands, to get out of, you know, as a subsidy program, as you mentioned. So we had a very successful campaign, both by the publishers, together with the libraries. And that kind of illustrates that joint approach really works. So it doesn't really work if only publishers do something or only librarians. So you need a joint up approach with as many players in our ecosystem. And so one campaign we did in the Netherlands was Ik lees thuis, or I read at home. And that can be either ebooks, which you can buy from a publisher or a bookseller, but it can also be ebooks that you get through the public library. If you're a member, you get it. So it was a really great comprehensive campaign and very successful. And I remember walking through the streets of Amsterdam, deserted because of Corona, and I could see the advertising everywhere. So the awareness is very high, but it also translated in lots of people started reading ebooks or buying ebooks. So that was extremely successful. And that was followed by another campaign, which is Koop Lokaal, so buy locally. So to really push to say, go to your own bookstore. Of course, the bookstores are closed now, which ties to another issue where I think we have to lobby very hard that publishing and bookstores are essential services. And we were successful in the Netherlands during the first lockdown, but not during the second. And of course, the same applies to everybody in this panel, that we all represent essential services one way or the other. But buy local also was extremely successful. The other thing is I would like to stress here is, of course, we have to get out of the corona crisis, and some organizations and some countries are more resilient than others, and it kind of appeals to your innovation strength. And so on, I'm very happy that the Dutch publishers, they're very much pushing for innovation. They have a renew the book, that's what we call it in Dutch and English, campaign around innovation. And so we've seen, for instance, an award for a chatbot, so that it's very easy for readers to find new titles and authors. We have an app that makes reading ebooks on iPhones and tablets easy, because it's really a challenge still. And another really innovative platform where you can get a trailer of a book, just like you have a trailer of a movie. So finally, I think, very important example from Italy. There was government support for the libraries, but rather than giving money straight to the libraries, the government decided so that they would support the bookstores, and they would provide then the libraries. And that's again that very broad support for the whole ecosystem. So here bookstores are supported, publishers are supported, authors are supported indirectly, and of course the libraries are supported in the end because they get the books, and that of course is great for the readers and the patrons. So that comprehensive approach is something I really would like to emphasize here. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much. Yes, of course, buy local, essential services, and then smart investment, understanding of the ecosystem and how the money flows across the ecosystem to reach really the most important stakeholders there. Thank you so much. Let's now maybe move to the next block of questions, and this is related. We already started to touch upon this, of course, how to build a more diverse and inclusive book sector. And here maybe we have a couple of questions. Once again, what we want to do here is, of course, understand a little bit what the issues are, but more importantly, what the solutions are there. When this question is related to several things, how to widen access of diverse groups of population? Well, we know that there are barriers in terms of gender, age, income, sometimes education or ethnic background to books, so to knowledge and books. So how can we break these barriers? Maybe I can turn now again to Peter Jenkins, please, if you can share with us briefly what your thoughts are on these things.
I think the most effective way that early years book gifting programs have had a reach and have reached audiences that they wouldn't have reached otherwise is through partnership, and particularly, most interestingly, partnership with the health sector. So Bookstore Flanders gifts through health clinics. We gift Book Trust in the UK primarily through health visitors in the home. America is led by pediatricians, and they gift. The German program is again through pediatricians, and some gift through maternity hospitals. So, and such a delivery partnership allows you in the first year of a child's life to be aiming for 100% of a universal reach across the whole country or region. And it's very cost effective and works at scale. And we're talking large numbers here. We're talking in the UK, in England and Wales, 4 million children, over 4 million books. In the USA, 5 million children, 7 million books, new books being gifted. And if you're using another sector like that, you're using local community expertise, you're using trusted professionals who are talking not from the book sector, so they are able to give a different perspective, and they can widen the response to to the messaging that they're giving. And it works with that sector because it's valuable to the sector, and I'll explain a little bit more. And one reason is because of the health benefits of such work. For instance, the Japanese Book Start program started 10 years after the first programs, 2000 in Japan, because of the impact on baby-parent attachment or bonding, and the impact that this can have on community cohesion or societal cohesion. And on our site, you'll find a Japanese pediatrician talking about research into the effects on sociability and empathy of such programs. And it's been particularly highlighted during COVID because you've had families at home with anxious parents and children with parents all the time in a way that sometimes they wouldn't have, they would have had more variety. So the health benefits are important, and that sector allows us to reach a massive group of people, and they take on this work because there is evidence supporting the impact, and we've heard follow the science under these COVID times. For the last year, and our programs do follow the science, follow the evidence. They all start with pilots. They have independent evaluations. They have RCTs, control groups, longitudinal studies, annual evaluations. And Book Start Flanders, for instance, started with a cohort of 300 children in 2005 in the same way as we did in the UK and Japan did, evaluated by the universities of Antwerp and Ghent, and then rolled out with health clinics in 2008 and was taken on by the Flanders government, the Flemish government in 2018, which leveraged a massive increase in reach. So the evidence is really important. On our impact pages on Book Trust, we say reading for pleasure has a dramatic impact on educational outcomes, well-being and social mobility. And the American Reach Out and Read say evidence tried and true, built on and backed by science, independent peer-reviewed research, and most importantly, our impact has been documented in ethnically and economically diverse families throughout the nation. And that's a critical aspect. These evaluation studies are with the ethnically and economically diverse. For instance, researchers in Latinx and low-income families in America showing the increase in reading taking place in the home, and also in cognitive and language development. So a child's understanding was 6 months developed over the control group, and their speech 3 months developed in those very early years. And these are with these Latinx low-income families, and that's where the most impact seems to take place, and it impacts on their accessing books from libraries, but also from bookshops. And just to add that all our programs emphasize diversity. So we target disadvantaged groups with multiple interventions. We work with disabilities with special books for visual and hearing impairment, autism, complex multiple needs, and books are multilingual. Guidance is multilingual in 15 to 30 languages in most of our programs. And this impacts on policymakers. So for instance, in America, literacy promotion is now statutory in pediatric primary care, and it impacts policy in terms of governments supporting and funding such programs. And just very quickly, if I may, just talk about two other sector support partnerships. One is the publishing sector. It's critical that children see themselves, and these are, as I've said, these are babies and toddlers, see themselves and their communities and their lives in the books that they read. And for instance, in the UK, our research was showing that even though a third of our school children are Black, Asian, minority ethnic, in 2017, only 6% of the books were published from such authors and had only 4% had Black and Asian characters, and only 1% had them as a main character. So it's a small number. So our programs have worked with publishers to adapt books to increase the diversity within books, and sometimes to commission new books. And the other key cross-sector partner who has allowed us to do the reach that we have in our programs is libraries. And what's interesting in the UK is that research has shown that libraries are the sector where diverse audiences have not reduced, even though many other audiences have reduced in libraries, partly to do with digital. This has not happened with the diverse sector in the UK, and interestingly, our Arts Council's 10-year strategy is emphasising that libraries are their top place for co-creation between the wider arts sector and the creative industries and the diverse community. And just finally, to add a final impact that benefits society as a whole, educational attainment impacts on jobs and social mobility. So our Book Trust's Book Start longitudinal program back when we started in the 90s showed that after, when children started school, their educational attainment, their scores were increased over the control groups that were tested across those 5, 6, 7 years. And that led to government coming in and supporting the national programme. So the impact of early years reading is powerful for the reading sector, and reading starts at home. It's crucial that the whole ecology is based on the early years developments, and return on investment on early years is massive. There are many studies and economists such as James Eckman talking about this, and the earlier the better. So my main lesson is start young, but my second lesson is look at cross-sectoral partnerships to widen access.
Yeah, fantastic. No, you underlined really many important points, and maybe for me there are two. Well, you spoke a lot about the evidence and the impact assessment studies that are there, well, in the UK, in Europe, but also in other countries. And of course, like a very subjective view, we all feel that cultural participation impacts on our well-being, etc. But now, well, with this kind of studies, but also with the publication of the World Health Organization scoping review about the impact of cultural participation on health and well-being, this is not anymore anecdotal, no? This is really quite robust evidence. In some countries, well, already it's great that policies are deriving from this evidence, but in other countries and regions, maybe policymakers still need to be convinced, and these are the kind of arguments we need. So I'll be very interested to learn and read more from the studies that you've been mentioning, Peter. And then secondly, you really explained, okay, evidence, very good, but then you explained how to make it happen by working with across sectors, with the health sector, other sectors, libraries, start young, early years interventions. We know that they are extremely important. Local community also has a great role to play there. So that was really very fantastic for me. Maybe I can, with the same question, I can now turn to Morten Wisby, President, European Council of Associations of Literary Translators. What's your take on this, maybe, Morten?
Well, my take on it, of course, would be to echo what has been said, that reading starts at home, but perhaps a bit as a kind of a small provocation, I would say reading starts at home, at the home of the writer and the translator, because the basis for all this wonderful promotion of reading and literature is, of course, that there is literature to promote. And that's that seems like a banal fact, but if we talk about inclusion and representation, it is actually a very sensitive issue, because the production of a true variety and diversity of literature in Europe relies upon writers and translators being able to publish literature, and that is under pressure. It has been for a long time, and the Corona crisis has further aggravated this pressure. And what we see what we see right now is that although there are huge results to be achieved by making literature more available to especially small children, if we look at that through a lens of diversity and inclusion, well, of course, as I said before, you need new literature with other voices and other images for you to mirror yourself in. If those young children, with the diversity they have, if they are to find themselves in literature, it's no good if the books that are being promoted to them are 30 years old. They may be extremely good children's books, but they would, if they are that old, they will often be characterized by very white protagonists and perhaps rather clear-cut role models and so on between boys and girls, you know, naughty boys and nice girls and so on. So that's how the production of literature, the production of new literature, is linked to the enormous value of promoting reading for children. So if you want a diversity in literature, you also need to have a framework that allows new literature to be produced. And what we see, as seen from in the perspective of European translators, we see that translators themselves assume an ever larger role in this, in finding and promoting new diverse literature from smaller languages, from more experimental genres, and so on. And that's a responsibility that translators are very happy to take upon themselves. But what it does require, of course, is that there is public support for the publication of such literature. And it also requires, of course, that translators who are not employees at publishing houses, but are independent freelancers within the precariat, within the gig economy, for this group of people to be able to undertake the agency of being ambassadors for new inclusive literature, they need not only public funding for the publication, they also need just minimally decent working conditions in terms of the copyright situation, in terms of their right to collective bargaining and so on. And I know these issues may be, you know, a bit of a wet blanket, but it is the reality that we need public funding and we need decent working conditions in order to be able to lift this assignment. So that's what I would like to emphasize for now.
Well, absolutely. We saw also during the crisis that the freelance, creative professionals, their work or living were already quite precarious. So juggling with several contracts to make a living. But during the crisis, many of them were excluded from the self-employment support schemes as well. So it's even, so there is something to be fixed with the policies there, obviously. Maybe I can now also turn, because Morten, you introduced already the issue of interpreters, translators being ambassadors for other languages, other cultures. Maybe I can now turn to Jan William Bos and hear your perspective, please.
Thank you very much. I am a literary translator from Romanian to Dutch, so obviously my perspective is somewhat limited, but I certainly want to subscribe to what Morten Visby said about the necessity of the production of literature and the translating of literature, because variety is achieved to a large extent also by translating each other's literature. Within Europe, we need to get to know each other better. That means we need to translate each other more. And I know it happens on a large scale, but I don't think there is a concerted effort to promote literature, especially from small languages into other small languages or medium-sized languages. If I talk about my own situation, Romanian, to Dutch, with both approximately 20 million native speakers. It is extremely important to promote the diversity in that way, and we also can benefit from each other's diversity. Romania has had a completely different development, certainly throughout its entire history, but also since the Second World War and in more recent times. And they can see a different kind of society developing from Dutch literature. For example, if you talk about the other way around, I know personally young colleagues who translate Dutch literature into Romanian who are actively promoting poetry written by young Dutch or Flemish poets who have a migration background, who are from the Caribbean, whose parents are from the Caribbean. And they offer actually a completely different literature, which in Romania is certainly not known. So it also contributes very much to that striving for diversity. And I also would like to add something to what Morten said about the situation of literary translators and to what extent they are ambassadors. Yes, they are. I mean, I feel myself very much an ambassador of Romanian literature in the Netherlands and in Flanders. And it is almost unavoidable, because otherwise you are, the publishing company simply doesn't have the expertise. No publishing company can have the expertise to know everything that's going on in different countries in the literary field. So they are dependent on experts. Of course, if an internationally successful novel comes out in English, in French, and in German, then Dutch publishing companies will also find out about that. But sometimes there are books that have not yet reached an international audience, and they are dependent on people who can read them. And a translator is often more convincing and has a better insight than the publisher from the home country, because of course they have a vested interest in promoting their own literature, while the translator would only suggest the translation of a book to a publishing company if he or she particularly likes that book and thinks that it is important and that would be interesting for an audience. Small language, I talk about small languages, which was also the term used by Morten Visby, because the space that is left for smaller languages is actually very limited, considering that 75% of the translations published in the Netherlands and in Flanders are from English. So if we take after that translations from German, from French, from Italian, from Spanish, and from Russian, for languages like Danish or Romanian or Dutch, the possibilities are fatally very limited. I will get back to some other aspects later on. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks so much. Maybe on this same question on how to rebuild a more diverse and inclusive sector, I can now turn to Michael Coleman again. So what are your ideas and your take on this?
Yes, well, just to follow the other speakers, so to follow the inspiration of science, maybe take a step back. So diversity and inclusion, it's not only the right thing to do, so it's this moral imperative for all of us, but there is also a very clear business case, so to say. Organizations that embrace diversity, that are more inclusive, they perform better. They perform better economically, financially. They take better decisions. They're more innovative and they're more creative. So, I mean, if you think about that, who doesn't want that, right? And that's why I'm very happy that many publishing organizations and publishers are increasingly embracing diversity and inclusion. And a great example here is the Publishers Association in the UK, and they embarked on a D&I journey a couple of years ago. It was a multi-year program, very structured, and they really want to address all the elements of D&I in the publishing industry in England. So there were trainings, there were awards, they got support from the highest level at the ministerial, from the minister. And they also surveyed how well they were doing in the area of diversity. And so the fourth survey just came out. They do it every year. And we see great progress, for instance, on gender. So there is gender equality at the top in the publishing industry. At the same time, we see still lots of lagging in the area of ethnicity. So it's very difficult to attract and to retain talent with an ethnic background in the UK. So it's called the Black and Asian minorities there. That, of course, is a great first step, because it's also linked not only like who is working in the publishing industry, but also what do we publish. And so it's very important that we have a diverse, population in the publishing industry, so we can also have a diversity in what we publish. So to put it around ethnicity, you cannot publish books by Black authors for a Black audience if your whole publishing industry is white, to put it a bit, black and white, so to say. And so I'm therefore also very happy that we see improvement on D&I, but there's still much more to do. And that also translates in diversity of what we publish. And so, I mean, and to give an example from my own country, in the Netherlands, there a scientist from Leiden University has been studying the representation of gender and minorities in textbooks. And so what we see there is that actually both are quite underrepresented. So you take a typical textbook, it's not very likely you see female scientists. It's not very likely you see people of color. And if you do, they're always weird stereotypes. So, the athlete is Black, but the scientist is a white man. And so the awareness there is, I think, extremely important. And I also hope that will start a process of change within the publishing industry. And there is an interesting question. So for instance, today, if you look at Dutch universities, only a quarter of the professors are female and 3/4 are male. So if you would say, so if you would depict then a professor in a textbook, so would you then follow the reality of society today, or would you like to think, well, what is the society the way it should be? And of course, we should have gender equality there. There's no reason whatsoever that there are not 50% men and 50% women also at the professorial level. So how normative would you like to be in your publication? So that's, I think, a very important question to ask, because we as publishers and also the other players represented here, we have a chance to kind of shape a new society. And we can do that through what we publish, through the children books that came up already. We do it all through the textbooks, through literature, and also through academic publications. So I can only call on more diversity within our organizations, but also more diversity on what we publish. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, well, that's a huge responsibility, really, well, because this is one of the sectors that is shaping the minds, here in the world. And what I liked very much is your point on, so what is the cost of not being diverse? What is the cost of this exclusion? It can be quantified in the lost skills, lost revenues as well for an organization, right? So it's quite a...
It's funny you mentioned that, because I mentioned there is a bonus for being diverse. Yeah. But there is also a penalty. So organizations that really lack diversity, they perform systematically worse than the market average. And so it's not only like a little cherry on the cake if you're diverse, it's a systematic phenomenon.
Wow. Paul, if I can turn to you, because you have this Every Story Matters project, and there are quite useful lessons from that one that can underpin some of these discussions, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Because as Michiel and others said, everybody's convinced, not only morally, also economically, it's necessary. But how do you leave the high-level theory and step into action? It needs to bring results, but it also needs to be authentic. So you really have to avoid the tokenism or the window dressing. So we have this project that really Every Story Matters, supported by the EU, that also wants to contribute to that by providing, well, training around the topic for every stakeholder involved, publishers, librarians, etc. And how do we do this? Well, we just dove into the deep, we have a program that really guides 6 talented writers and illustrators from 6 different European countries, diverse themselves, to produce inclusive stories for children. Each participant is matched to a mentor in their own country that is very experienced with a large network and coaches the participants in the writing or the drawing. And during the program, the participants follow workshops and masterclasses to deepen their knowledge of inclusive storytelling. There are residencies being given to further work on their stories while being in a new environment. And finally, they will be pitching their stories for publishers at book fairs. So this trajectory brings our project to the center of questions surrounding diversity and inclusion, and works towards creating new and solid role models. What are the obstacles in real life? And by stimulating more inclusive stories ourselves, and by encouraging the existing book sector to do the same, Every Story Matters goal is to invest in creating, well, of course, broad public awareness, but also in development of concrete tools and bringing everybody together. This also touches on the development of an inclusion charter for an inclusive European book sector in close dialogue with all the stakeholders, also with Michiel Koolman, who knows about this. And we really want to identify the common difficulties and answer with concrete tools. So the charter not only wants to bring everybody together, but wants to be an active tool, not a high-level theory, dead piece of paper, but something to continuously work upon. So if the policymakers in the audience want to get involved here, please let me know or check the website everystorymatters.eu, because we have a kickoff meeting March the 17th to make sure the charter becomes really something that lives.
Yeah, Paul, many thanks. Maybe we can also post the website link in the chat so that people can see it as well. Listen, we have a bit less than half an hour. We have a short half an hour now before we close the session. And we wanted to address another 2 sets of questions, but well, the good news is that we already started to focus on some of the issues already in previous answers. So maybe I can ask our panelists to be rather concise in the next half an hour. We wanted to focus on how to ensure talent development and, well, financial sustainability of those who work in the sector, writers, translators, illustrators, and other professions. So here I can now again turn to Paul, in fact, because you had this quite smart way of addressing these issues through, well, your reading promotion project policy, which, well, shows what is needed to set up this policy is a good understanding of the ecosystem and how people, readers, and money flows across the different stakeholders as well. So maybe, Paul, you can say briefly a few words explaining.
Yeah, I will try to stay brief. So we have a systematic support of authors' readings by Flanders Literature that not only improves the position of the writer and the quality of the book, but also opens up a qualitative offer for less wealthy buyers, such as schools or libraries. The policy centralizes the operating costs and therefore removes barriers, which means that, well, schools, libraries, or other organizations with limited funds that want to organize an author lecture, they can get financial support from us and administrative guidance. So a school that wants to organize a reading with a writer, they can apply for 15 grants a year, and each grant equals just 100 euros. So they can, let's say, go to the website, search a writer for the 3rd grade, and then everything is being taken over by us. If the author is available and the booking is made, we do all the financial administration, and in that way the school gets a qualitative writer and it doesn't have to pay that much, and still the writer is fairly paid. So it lowers the threshold for such a school. Each author can give a maximum of 15 subsidized lectures a year. And in Flanders, we have a list of almost 1,000 accredited writers, so to speak, who are all capable of giving such a lecture that encourages reading. They all applied for this list, and the application needs to get an approval of an independent advisory commission that audits the quality and the aspects of the reading promotion in their approach. So as I mentioned, then the authors receive the subsidy of their reading, also the contribution of the organizer, all through us. No big hassle. And every year we see that the number of the readings goes up. Of course, due to COVID, 2020 was a bit different, but even then and now, lots of readings still take place, but mainly digitally by streaming. And in a conclusion, every euro of support Flanders Literature gives, the market adds 1.65 euros on top, and we haven't seen the end of this growing effect. And it's actually a policy easy to replicate, I think, as a local policy maker, and it doesn't need to be very expensive.
Super. Maybe I can now turn to, again, Jan William Bos. Well, you are a mentor yourself, so when we speak about talent development, it will be good to hear your perspective, and you also can share with us the lessons from the Connecting Emerging Literary Artists project, which started in a few countries and now is has quite a large reach, I would say. If I can also ask you to be quite brief.
Yes, I'll do my best. There are two aspects. One of them is the financial position of translators, and especially young translator. And the second aspect is the training of budding translators. As far as the financial situation of translators, as Morten has already stated too, that is often very precarious. There are grants available for experienced translators, but for young translators, often not, with the result that actually it is quite impossible to live decently from just translating from a small language into a small language. Most people who do this either have other sources of income or they have a position at a university. In my case, I worked as a sworn interpreter and translator. And I don't see any quick solution to that problem, to be honest. The second aspect is the training of young translators. I myself have participated twice in the CELA project, the Connecting Emerging Literary Artists, the first time as a translator, because I was not emerging anymore, because there was no young emerging translator to be found from Romanian to Dutch. For the second series of CELA, this unfortunately was possible. So I have participated with great pleasure in CELA 2 as a mentor for both translators from Romanian and into Romanian. CELA started a number of years ago in the Low Countries, in Flanders and in the Netherlands, and originally 6 countries were participating. And from each country, there were 3 young writers and 3 young translators, with the ambition that the young writers would produce literary texts that would be translated by the translator to all other languages of the participating countries. It was a huge success. It was very important for young writers and translators because it offered them a possibility to build up a network. It also offered them the possibility to constantly interact with colleagues. I mean, translating and writing are lonely professions. So it's very important to meet other people in the same field, people from other countries who are dealing with a similar situation. And there were performances, there were meetings with the audience, which is also extremely important for young writers and young translators. And it was a great success. CELA benefited from a generous support from the European Commission, and it made it possible that for CELA to actually extend the whole project with another 3 participating countries. Unfortunately, the whole effort has been thwarted somewhat by the COVID pandemic, but we hope that it will continue in the future because it is very important and very rewarding. And I think that also on a local level that there was a lot of support and interest for what CELA had to offer and to present. I'll keep it to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Morten, I don't know if you have anything to add to what we were just saying. You already mentioned some of my questions in the earlier intervention on the financial unsustainability of creative professionals.
Well, I would add a few things. For one, for translators to be able to fulfill the role of being an ambassador for literature, they obviously have the linguistic and literary skills required. They will often be the most knowledgeable and the most passionate people in promoting, for example, small language literature, and they will have a lot to offer based on their experience as a literary translator. But they do sometimes lack some of the competencies that are perhaps more commercial. They need training in how to secure titles, how to develop relationships with publishers, how does the whole mechanism of foreign rights management, how does it work? And also just low-level skills in promoting literature. How do you navigate at a book fair? How do you develop contacts and so on? These are sort of very concrete things that translator would benefit hugely from being supported in acquiring. So I think that there is a huge potential in the networks between translator associations, but also book fairs and residency houses. There are across Europe various translator houses and writers' residencies, Strahlen, Lohen, etc. If we could have all these people together for workshops and post-career training, I think that would be hugely beneficial. Now, that's a very concrete thing. Otherwise, I would also mention the need to include translators in the national support for literature. That is not the case in every European country. Right now, my Italian colleagues are campaigning to be included in Italian state support for literature. So it's not the case all over Europe, and that would be extremely beneficial in making sure that public funding for literature does not only support the development of national silos of literature, but also makes that literature cross borders across Europe. We need to step away from viewing the need for translation as a kind of embarrassment. The reason why European literature and indeed European culture is the strongest and most vibrant in the world is actually because we have the challenges that we have in terms of our different cultures and different languages. European literature is great because it is fractured. European literature is created when it's being transformed from one European language to another. That can be viewed as an obstacle, but it should be viewed as what makes us better and stronger and more interesting than the bloody Americans, because they have the advantage that they all speak the same language, but it makes them more homogeneous, and it deprives them of the extreme creative spark that flies when you translate books from Romanian into Danish and from Danish into Spanish. So we need to step away from looking at translation as an obstacle and see it as a huge resource for European culture. And we need to support it, and we need to support the people who actually do that work. That is what I would say.
No, absolutely.
Here.
Yeah, so you mentioned very practical things like support entrepreneurial learning and marketing skills in the sector. Well, then the residency issue, and this is interesting because many cities that enjoyed over tourism in the past, like Venice or many other cities, now are thinking what to do with all these premises, and maybe indeed to turn them into residencies for artists, and that's something that can maybe do a lot of good. And then, yeah, very practical thing, include translators into the national support schemes for literature. Yeah. Now, if I can also turn again to Peter Jenkins, because Book Trust is also about supporting talent development and mentoring. If you can say a few words about that, Peter, very briefly, if I may.
Yes, very briefly, a project called Book Trust Represents, and it echoes what I've been hearing from Paul and from Morten. And interestingly, over the last 3 years, we have seen a slight increase in children's authors published, Black and Asian authors published each year, and the representation has slightly increased over the last 3 years. So something is changing. But they're supported with seminars and events and workshops, emerging authors about the sector and about publishing in the way that Morten was talking about, with mentoring opportunities and with shadowing, and like Paul talking about author visits. This is a crucial part of the portfolio of many children's authors, and supporting them in developing those skills and those contacts, and also developing their media awareness and abilities. And an interesting project was called Pass the Pen, where emerging authors took over the Instagram posts of a established author, and that was quite an interesting development. But I think the most interesting lesson probably altogether is developing a community of emerging authors with established authors in the diverse and then broadening out sector, so that they don't feel alone, so that they are interacting. And the digital world is good for that, with Facebook groups and digital newsletters, and so they're not alone, and they do feel there are opportunities, and these emerging authors are beginning to get published. So it's very exciting.
Fantastic. Now maybe we can spend the remaining 10 minutes with this final question. What will be the top 2-3 top actions that you think cities and regions should put in place now to support the sector, of course, and well, to address the challenges that we've been discussing, like the search for more diversity, financial sustainability of the sector. So for you, what are the top 2 priorities that should be addressed now? And maybe I can turn back to Jenny. Jenny, now, what would be your suggestions here? And then maybe we'll do a quick round of interventions from everybody.
Well, I think what we've heard throughout the whole discussion is a need for collaboration and for looking at the whole industry, rather than at different silos of the chain, of the value chain. So it starts with the author, it continues with the translator, it goes on to the publishing houses, which have a diverse, it's not only literature, it's a lot of different genres and different needs that come with that, and different publishing cycles, and then onto the retailers, to the libraries, to the online retailers, to the the whole chain should be taken into account. That's one thing, and I think that's something that and illustrators obviously as well. That's something that Frankfurt tries to do as a platform, right? We are a mirror of the whole industry. Everybody comes together in Frankfurt. So, I mean, we're happy to provide a platform for collaboration and discussion and for bringing all these players together. Obviously, and we're trying to do that in everything that we do. But I think it's important to look at that. I cannot judge what's happening in the background, but sometimes it feels to me that parts of the industry are left out, and then rightly, riot, or not, don't riot, but protest against that lack of recognition. And the second, that ties into the whole discussion around IP and protection of the author rights, protection of translation rights, protecting people that work in the value chain, while also making content accessible. So it's a very tough question on how to do that, but I think making it easy to protect IP while making sure that everybody in the chain profits from it and can live from it, so that creativity is actually fostered and continues to thrive, is something that I would, with my background in rights, would encourage to look at that.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jenny. Michael, what's your list of top 3 to 4 priorities?
Yeah, so I agree that we should take a very comprehensive ecosystem-wide approch, and that any financial support will actually go with the stipulation that the recipient can show that they embrace diversity and inclusion. So it's not like here's the money, you can do whatever you want. That you have to spend it wisely and also show that you do it in a diverse way and an inclusive way. And then finally, what I haven't heard come up in the discussion, and that's the fixed book price. So if you think about diversity of publications and you go to an average bookstore, in countries where there's a fixed book price, there is much more diversity. We can really, in a Dutch bookstore, read poetry from Portugal and fiction from Finland, and not only the bestsellers. And that's just because of the fixed book price. So that's my final recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we are even widening, even giving a broader scope to all this. Elena, maybe you can share with us what are your suggestions for priority action by regional or city governments here?
If I think of the situation in Italy, that probably is somehow different, but not so much from the situation of other countries. I think that apart from some supporting in funding and money, etc., the governments should much more support the reading promotion, but not with those beautiful and also useful campaigns, but trying to push the inclusion of books in areas where books have not been welcomed until now. I mean, books have to be everywhere in the TV fictions, in broadcasted events, not for the book lovers. When it comes to children's literature, that's my area, there's no attention at all, real attention, I mean, paid by the media, paid by the newspapers. We organized the children's section of the Premio Strega, that is the most important literature award in Italy. When you have the Premio Strega for adult, you have 10 pages on on any newspapers. When it comes to the children's, maybe you have 10 lines in 5 newspapers. I mean, it's important to promote the reading campaign, but it is very important to promote a different concept, to support weak categories as the translators are, to understand that the difference is value, as many of you as underlined, and support this, and don't accept that also now there are so many differences in treatments with translators and, for example, illustrators. That's another weak area of professionals. So I'd suggest to go a bit deeper, to focus which are the needs and how you can go ahead changing something in real. Maybe this is a vision from my country, but this is what I'd suggest.
No, absolutely. I think it's quite universal what you're really suggesting. Morten, I was wondering if you can share with us your 2-3 points for policy action by city and regional governments.
Yeah, I will restrict myself to just one. I was very happy to hear Michelle Coleman mention fixed book prices. I believe that's part of a wider issue, because it's not just about fixed book prices, it's about accepting literature as a cultural sector and not exclusively as a commercial market. Because if we want literature to fulfill the potential it has for European society in terms of diversity and inclusion and in terms of reading skills and all these things, then of course it requires a sustainable book market, a book market that is sustainable for all, for the whole value chain. It must be sustainable for publishers. They must have a functioning market to sell books in. They must have a good commercial framework to exist commercially, but it must also be sustainable for illustrators and translators and writers. And for all those things to work together, we need to be able to talk to each other. And in many parts of Europe, the book markets have become so liberalized with the cancellation of fixed book prices, for example. They have become so liberalized that there are countries in Europe where it would be illegal for me to discuss standard terms with my friend Michel Coleman on the publisher side. That is illegal in Ireland. That is illegal in Denmark. It is illegal in a number of European countries. Now, I believe that it should be possible in Europe to have a book market that is regulated, that is accepted as a cultural sector, without doing away with all the benefits of having a free economy. It's not either or. There are many industries in Europe. Look at medicine, look at transportation. There are many industries that can be regulated in a meaningful way while still functioning on a basically private basis. And that's where European publishing needs to go. It needs to continue as a commercial market, but it should be regulated in terms of cultural policy. That would allow European literature and the European book market to fulfill the potentials we have talked about today. I would like to be able to discuss such things with Michel Coleman without ending up in jail. And I'm not exaggerating.
Well, thank you, Martin. If I may now turn maybe to Jan Willem and Peter Jenkins, and then with Paul, we will conclude the session in a few minutes. So, Jan Willem.
Thank you. I'm not in a position, I think, to give any important advice to local authorities or policymakers. I recognize how complex the matter is and that it requires cooperation of all parties involved, both the national and local authorities, professional associations, and the 300,000 people that are involved as professionals in the book business in Europe. Thank you very much.
Yes, Peter?
And I would just add to what I've said about investing in early years, following the science, working cross-sectorally, but following our Arts Council's top strategy in the UK for developing diversity. It is both the arts sector and the creative industry sector is co-create with the community, go down to the community level, and sometimes you might have to think outside the box.
Very good. Paul, and I'm now turning to you. So I was wondering whether we achieved this objective that we wanted to have a rather practical discussion, no? And come up with some kind of practical project ideas, solutions. What do you think?
Well, a lot of work to do. And the conclusions by many of the panelists is everybody needs to work together. Government, market, regulation, but not too far. The whole sector needs to have a recurrent dialogue. I have nothing to add on this. This is really the key thing. So let's not have this. We have now a first, in my opinion, first discussion. Let's not end here. Let's talk further and prolong this discussion into more solutions. So maybe we can have a call at the website for people to get involved and to really focus more on specific topics with everybody who feels the need to stay involved.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you, Paul. I would like to thank all our speakers for really finding time to join us today and for sharing their thoughts during this almost 2-hour session. I'm sure for our audience and well, for myself, it was extremely interesting. And as Paul was suggesting, we'll think how to continue this discussion and not just putting things on paper and releasing a report. And Paul, I would like really to thank you because you were the mastermind of this session, in fact, and the host, unfortunately not physically, but still you really pulled this session together. So thank you very much. And now we can enjoy the lunch. And I hope to see you all, our audience, our participants at 1:30, this is Paris time, where we will kick off the sessions on SME support ecosystems for cultural and creative sectors. Thank you and see you at 1:30. Thank you so much.